Hi, everyone. I am here today with Yelsse Bahena. Did I say your last name right?
Bahena, yeah, or Bahena in English.
Bahena. Okay, welcome. Thank you so much for being here on the show with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course. I'm so looking forward to speaking with you more, Yeltsi. We started connecting a little bit about your work teaching and what you've been doing, sharing information and education about finances with the immigrant community. So, was excited to have you come on. And yeah, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit and where you come at this area from?
Yeah, for sure. Um, right now I'm located in Las Vegas, and I'm teaching Spanish, but I also teach I call it like a budgeting, savings, sort of like personal finance class that is available for us. We have like this option to teach whatever we want on Fridays. And so I decided to stick with that for the rest of the year. So I get a new group of students every 3 weeks. So I've been doing that. And right now, since we're slowly opening up, I think after think the middle of May, I'm going to get all my students in person. And so that's very exciting. And yeah, I'm just very passionate about this topic. And I think it's very important for immigrant communities to have this knowledge, this exposition. And yeah.
Absolutely. And I was so happy to hear that when you said it, because one of the big problems we always see is how this stuff is not taught in school and how it's so difficult to access this information. So it's really inspiring that you've made it a priority of all the things you could choose from. How has it
Yeah.
been going teaching your students?
I'm sorry?
How has it been going teaching them
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's been just teaching in general.
about finances?
About finances. I think it's been really good, but it's also very challenging because there's so much information, and I only have 3 weeks. It's like every other 3 weeks, so it's not something that's continuous for over a semester. So I just start with the basics. We talk about um, like gross income, and then after tax income, and a lot of them were very in shock when they get their first paycheck, like they're not really getting the full amount.
Mhm.
You have to pay taxes, and that was something that was very surprising to many students. So we talk about a lot of topics, and they're really invested in it. I really enjoy it because students sign up for those classes. So let's say there's a class, like a cooking class, there's a rock climbing class. So students get to choose which choice time they want to learn about. And so a lot of the students who are in my class are they're participating, they're engaging, and so I'm really happy that we have that option right now.
That is so amazing. And let's go back a little bit how you kind of got there on this topic for the students. So and I understand that is it many of your students are from immigrant families?
Yeah, almost 90% of them, I would say.
Wow. So what has been your connection to immigration?
Um, so my parents used to be immigrants. I know that sounds a little strange, but I'll explain. So my mom immigrated from Mexico. Both of my parents, my mom's from La Ciudad de Mexico, and my dad from Morelos. And they immigrated like 30 years ago, and they raised three kids. And thankfully, based on their their knowledge and their support, like we are here. My brother has a coffee shop. I'm a teacher. My sister is finishing up school. So it's really awesome to see that throughout this course, like you can see, um, we all have our like big, or I call it like the big girl job,
Mhm.
and it's really cool to see that change. And
Mhm.
my parents actually recently moved back to Mexico last July, so that's why I said used to be immigrants, because
Mhm.
they're no
Yeah.
longer here.
Yeah.
So they're building their retirement home, and it's really I don't know. It's that you get to a point where you feel grateful for those sacrifices, and you were able to build a life that, if they hadn't made that sacrifice, we would not be here. We would not be having this conversation, you know? So it's just
Yeah.
interesting.
Wow. Yeah. And I can imagine how full circle that is for you and your family that they're now back in Mexico.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, going from being immigrants to now returning home. What has that been like for you all?
I think it's been interesting because my parents had lived in the United States in, how do I put it? Like, they've lived more in the United States than they did in Mexico because
Hmm.
they had migrated when they were in their 20s. But it's just interesting, like socially. They're like, do you know the word pocho?
No, I don't.
No, pocho is like when you are, you come to, so you grow up in the United States and then you don't know a lot of Spanish, or maybe you don't fit in to the
Mhm.
Hispanic culture, but we call them pochos. So sometimes when they go to Mexico or like their home country, they're like, they don't fit in. And so it's very interesting because they had been here for such a long time. They speak Spanish, obviously, but sometimes they'll say like, the ketchup or the furniture. And then my relatives, I have no idea what those words are, but it's like so ingrained in their vocabulary. It's like the Spanglish. So,
Yes.
and then sometimes they forget words, and then they ask me because I teach Spanish, and I'm like, oh my god, how do you guys like forget these words? But
That's so funny. That's starting to happen to my husband now, who immigrated 8 years ago from
uh-huh,
Ecuador. And like for so long, it was like him feeling insecure about his English.
uh-huh.
And now he's working on translating some stuff for us for immigrant finance. And he's like, I have to actually look up some words because my brain is not remembering.
It's funny, but it's a reality. It's like, I don't know. You just have to. It's a cultural change for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something part of the immigrant experience people don't talk about enough about how you can no longer feel like you fit in anywhere when you
Yeah,
go through that experience.
yeah, I agree. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, how nice for them that they've been able to go back and reconnect with their roots there.
Mhm.
So coming from immigrant parents or former immigrant parents, what was, your personal finance experience like and how did you get started with learning about finances?
So I think, embarrassingly enough, I didn't start having this, or having personal finance knowledge until my first year as a teacher. So that was like my first professional job, you could say,
Hmm.
which was in 2017. So it wasn't even that long ago. When I started to have like a paycheck, and I was living with my family in Los Angeles, when my parents were living there. And I had my bills, and I was using my mom's car, and I was paying rent and all these things. I did have a little bit of a credit card debt. Um, but not until did I realize, after like, it's like the moment that I started working there, I started to write down what I needed to pay, because before I didn't really have that many bills, maybe just like a credit card,
Hmm.
my credit card debt, but that's it. But when I started to have like more responsibilities, I had to write things down literally, and I realized that I had a lot of money left over in this. Obviously, this is like awesome, right? But at the
Hmm.
same time, I was like, what do I do with this money? And this is the first time that this has ever happened. Like, I had jobs in college, but it was all minimum wage jobs, and it wasn't enough for me to save money. But now I had all this money left over, and I remember the first month, I was like, what? And I decided to just buy a bunch of clothes, and I don't remember, I think I went out with friends and things like that. And then the following month, I started to do some reflection. I was like, maybe I should not be doing what I did last month. And so I decided to just start saving up money. I cashed out whatever was left over. It was almost $1,000 a month. And I'm really grateful because this doesn't happen often, especially in LA.
Mhm.
Um, and I started to save up money every month. I would cash it, put it into a safe, and then over the course of a year, I had about $12,000, and I was wondering, okay, should I, invest in a home or should I invest somewhere else? And at the time, my brother was thinking of opening up a coffee shop, and I was very worried. Like, I don't know if it was gonna. Um, I didn't know if I could trust my brother, if this was like a thing that was going to happen, or it was just a lot of things. I was like, should I do it? Should I not? And then I ended up investing in his coffee shop, and um, now it's flourishing. And that was my very big,
Wow.
like my first investment. And I can't believe I even doubted my brother because he's actually a college dropout. And so there's a lot of social aspects there that
Yes.
made me doubt him.
Yes.
But thankfully, he has able to manage with the business. And so it's pretty cool. So I did that. And then um, there was a lot of pieces in the story. I don't want to take up too much time, but um, I, th- I think after that year, I learned about balance transfer because I was paying a credit card and I was paying on time. I had a good average credit card credit score, and but I was like paying it for over 2 years, and I was wondering why doesn't my balance or like my the quantity why doesn't it go lower? And I didn't know that I was being charged an interest rate of over 25%.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't understand. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, now obviously I'm like, how did you not know about this? But my parents actually knew about balance transfer. So thankfully my parents had that knowledge, but they didn't know that this was happening to me until I had mentioned it to them. And they were kind of like, no, 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 you're not supposed to you're not supposed to pay interest. And they introduced me to balance transfer, and I would always get offers in the mail, but I would always throw it away because
Mhm.
I was like, I don't need another credit card. And then we went through the mail, and then we ended up getting a card, and I did the balance transfer, and I paid off my debt like less than a year. So it was kind of crazy to know that, wow, I didn't know that. And now, ever since then, I have never paid like interest rate at all. Like, it's
Yeah.
always been
Never.
0%. Yeah. And I
Wow.
then also realized this with my partner. My partner's actually undocumented. He's waiting for
Mhm.
his residency right now.
Okay.
And that's why I kind of have a little bit of knowledge of like how his experience has been with credit. And he also didn't know about balance transfer, and I also noticed that he was like paying interest, and I introduced it to him, and I was like, I thought this was, I don't know, it's like this should be like um on the top list of personal finance, I think, because that's interest rate is what makes banks, rich. And
Yes.
so we should just use the banks, but not to the point where they can make profits.
Yeah. Wow. It
Um,
sounds like you had a lot of really foundational lessons through these experiences. If I may just comment quickly, I mean,
yeah, of course.
I think it's great you shared the example of your brother's business, and thank you so much for sharing that. Congratulations to him.
Yeah,
That's just such a great story about how investing doesn't have to necessarily be in the stock market. That's just one type of investing.
yeah,
But you can also invest in a family business, in your own business, in your own knowledge and opportunities. And look how much it grew, like you said, So I think that's really, really exciting for people to hear that as an option as well.
yeah.
And then the credit card stuff, I'm sorry you had to go through it, but it sounds like, you learned a lot and you're able to share that now with your students who may be going through it.
Yeah, of course. I know it's a journey for sure, but And I share these stories and these experiences with my students. I'm like, I made the mistake of doing this. And if it hadn't been for my parents, I would still be paying interest rate probably, or maybe find
Uh-huh.
out much later than sooner.
Yeah. How do they react when you tell them the story?
They're just kind of like in shock that that had happened, and
Yeah.
because it's a vulnerability, and when it's not easy to share because you're teaching the class, right, that about having a good credit score and all these things. But I think it's important to share it, that it's okay to make mistakes. I mean, we're
Absolutely.
young, and sometimes it's due to lack of education. I literally
Yeah.
will say that it's due to that.
Yes, and we do learn from those mistakes and can redirect, and by sharing with people in our community or family members, we can help others prevent the same mistakes like
Mhm.
you're doing. And I'm sorry I interrupted. Were there other steps in your journey you wanted to share?
No, that's pretty much it. I think I've grown so much from those experiences, and I also have realized recently in the past year of how, like, if it weren't for my credit score, like, I would not have the house that I have now. I would not
Mm,
have the car that I have now. And so when I started to think about those things, that's what encouraged me to do the choice time on personal finance, because I'm able to have this lifestyle, but it's because my parents had educated me. It's because I learned from my mistakes. So I wanted others to also have that knowledge, especially at the high school level. I think that's important.
yeah, I really respect that a lot, and it's always means so much when someone is sharing from their own experience and story to help others. So it says a lot about you. And I definitely relate to some of it because we also started because we had struggled figuring out finances when my husband immigrated here, and there was like nothing out there
Hmm.
really. So yeah, I totally can see where you're coming from. So how did it go from like when you made the decision, this is what you're going to teach, to starting to create the curriculum or think about how you wanted to teach it for your particular students?
I think I try to solidify what I knew by also inviting friends that have gone through similar experiences. I have about three guest speakers, so including my partner, who touched on if undocumented people can apply for a credit card. And he also explained a little bit about that experience. And just from personal testimonies, and also providing them with reliable resources, because there's a lot of information on this and it can be overwhelming. And also, you don't want to get information from like a Reddit forum. And I think that's important. I know it's like common sense for us, right? Because I mean, we're adults and like we've gone through these things, but at the same time, we want students to have the information that is accurate. Like, I always recommend NerdWallet or Penny Hoarder. So providing with those resources for students is important.
Yeah, those are good resources. I like NerdWallet a lot as well.
Yeah.
It's a great resource. So yeah, let's dive in a little bit more into this topic with how undocumented people can grow credit scores. What has been, sort of the main focus, or what you found particularly helpful for people to know?
Yes, this is an important topic for sure. And undocumented people can definitely apply for a credit card with the ITIN number. It doesn't have to be with a social security number. But I also want to point out that there are challenges. So
Yeah.
there are definitely, for example, corporate banks like Wells Fargo, Citibank, Capital One. Typically, they're going to be less friendly with undocumented people than credit unions. So my biggest recommendation, and this was something that my partner had also mentioned to me, is that it's better to apply with a credit union rather than one of those corporate banks. And I think a lot of people, and maybe it's a discriminatory issue, but the way I see it is it's more of a trust issue because a lot of these banks, I mean, money or building a credit score is more than just money. It's like the trust, right? So if you pay your bills on time, the bank is more likely to give you more money or offer you more money and better rates and all those things. And I think with the corporate banks, the problem is that they think that if you're undocumented, you can be deported anytime or you can just flee the country and not pay your bills. I think that's the one of the
Mm,
reasons why it's challenging, and it sucks. It really does because it's, I mean, they want, that community wants to stay here and work, and so there are some obstacles, but it's
yeah.
not impossible to apply for
Yeah.
um, a
Yeah,
credit card.
we've had similar experience working with people who are undocumented, and exactly what you said, the ITIN is how you do it. I, just something I'd add that I'd love to hear your thoughts on too is the importance of advocating for yourself with these financial institutions, because sometimes, often what I see is they don't advertise that they'll take ITINs, but you have to call and ask.
Yeah,
Right. And
exactly. I was about to mention that
yeah.
it's like this information is not as promoted, and I don't know why. But
Yep.
I think that's a good point because we want undocumented people to have credit, be able to buy a car, buy a home, and all these things. But if the information isn't out there, they're going to be like, well, I'm undocumented, so I'm not even going to try.
Hmm.
And then they're stuck in the same financial status. So I think, yeah, I definitely agree that that's a reality that we have to face.
Yeah, and something I always like to emphasize is there's a difference between the immigration law system and the financial institutions and tax laws. And there, like whether, you have permission to work or legal status is separate from whether you can open a bank account or credit card. There's no like laws saying you have to have citizenship
Mm-hmm.
to access certain financial products. But like you're saying, it just can be more challenging. There can be more barriers. Like undocumented people know for so many things, right? It's just like so many unnecessary barriers. I'm so glad you're helping people learn about their rights. Has that been a big piece of it, of just encouraging your students to know they do have that option?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's been. I think inviting my partner to speak with my students was important. I mean, I don't know how many students are undocumented or how many of their parents are undocumented. That information is only spoken within trust, but I do know that a lot of the students have families from Mexico or El Salvador or Honduras. So, but I mean, they're not going to share their status or anything. But but I have a section on how undocumented people can apply for a credit card. But I think students I remember I did like a reflection slide for them that they had to share, like, what is something that you learned today, something like that, like their reflection of the day. And a lot of them were surprised that these challenges exist for undocumented people.
Mm,
So that's
yeah,
when I realized that, this information is valuable because
yeah,
it's not that spoken as
yeah,
often.
definitely. Is there anything you want to add about growing credit scores that's maybe specific to people using ITINs who are undocumented or just in general?
I think the biggest thing is just to not be afraid. I know, I understand that, there's this risk or this mentality that if you put yourself out there that you'll get deported. Or, I mean, that fear is a real thing. Um, but at the same time, you also want to build wealth. You also want to have these opportunities of building a life, not just surviving, right, but also thriving. And that's just a big factor of just to not be afraid. It's a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then in terms of like all of the important things you have learned about personal finance in your journey and that you're sharing with your students, what's the number one lesson that you wish you had learned earlier on?
Um, yeah, there's a lot of lessons. I would say the number one lesson is to be open to learn um, about this topic, because my brother actually, this is a good example. I hope he doesn't listen to this because he'll get mad. But at the beginning of his, after he graduated from high school, he did have a credit card, and he actually was so he was very stubborn in his own ways, and my parents tried to educate him about balance transfer and saving money and all these things, but he was not open to that information. And I have friends who also have been very stubborn, and just they would, like, I would tell them, I would encourage them, hey, like, to build your credit. You don't have to. A lot of them thought that they can just um, close their account once they have paid all their debt, but you should be able to keep that account. Just don't use it, just so that
Mhm.
you can have that credit, because that strengthens your credit when you just have the account. You don't have to use it. Just don't close it.
Yeah.
Just keep it there. And one of my friends like decided to close it, and they're just not open to that information. And I don't know if it's because they think that they're doing it their way, but I think the biggest lesson, and I'm very thankful that I mean, I'm stubborn, but I'm not that stubborn.
Mhm.
And I did listen to my parents when they shared about the balance transfer, and I think it's just important to be open to learn,
Mhm.
because if you don't, you'll be stuck paying interest. You'll be stuck in the same debt, and yeah, I think that's one important lesson.
That's a really good one, just in terms of overall mindset with learning about finances. So much of it is about our openness. I totally agree with you because there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
And, if it can be really intimidating, and it can cause a lot of anxiety to start looking at your numbers, whether it's budgeting, looking at your spending habits. But by just like starting to be open, like you said, to learning more and new ways of doing things, that's how you can get on the pathway to having more options and being stronger financially.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. For sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing this wisdom and for the work you're doing with your students, Yelsse. Please share with everyone where they can follow and support you or anywhere you want to redirect them.
Yeah, I mean, if people have any questions about, or if you're a high school teacher, and have this opportunity to implement a new class or something like that, you can definitely reach me at Profe Yelbass. And I'm sure you'll have it written down, right, on your
Yes, we'll link
infos.
to it.
Okay, great. And also, if you're in the LA area, my brother makes excellent coffee, and it's in the San Fernando Valley. It's called the Traveler's Coffee Cup. So yeah, it's really good. I'm not just saying it because it's our coffee shop, but it's really good.
Where does he get his coffee from?
Oh yes, that is. I was going to mention this as well. So we have this. There's a pueblito. It's called what is it called? Not Xochitlan, Morelos. I'm not sure if are you Mexican or have been to Mexico?
I'm not Mexican. I've been, but not there.
Oh, okay, okay. So it's like 2 hours south of Mexico City,
Okay.
and the pueblito is we met a family. They're the La Familia Palacios, and they dedicate themselves um, to sow, harvest, and roast the coffee all in their little house. And I've met the family, and it's like 100% organic. And it's just this very humble family who loves coffee. And they also do tours. It's not touristic at all. It's literally a very rural town. And my brother sometimes travels to Mexico to go get the coffee from there.
Mm.
Or sometimes my dad goes to Tijuana, and then my brother just picks up the coffee. So it's a very, very family oriented coffee shop. So there's
I
that.
would love to go if I'm ever out in LA. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much it. But thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you, you too. Bye bye.